Hey guys, uh, so we've got a little break in the weather, some blue sky, and it's a little chilly this morning, but today's the day when I got to rotate these tires. I think I may have mentioned in previous videos that I rotate the tires pretty frequently on the Wrangler. A lot of it just has to do with the fact that when you're trying to stretch the most miles out of something like these Milestar, the Patagonias, it's a good idea to rotate them probably more frequently than normal. As you start to see a little bit of cupping happen or something like that on the tires, don't let it get away from you, because it'll make the tires noisy. It can even, as tires get really cupped, they can even start generating a little bit of a pull in your steering and things like that. So it's a good idea to try and rotate them very frequently. And I actually rotate the spare end as well. So all 5 tires are kind of getting as much wear as possible and get the most miles out of them. Right now I'm getting close to almost 20,000 miles on these, and as you can see, tread's looking pretty good. I do notice sometimes on the fronts in particular that mostly on the driver's side, and I think this is pretty common, or excuse me, passenger side, you'll start to see a little bit of cupping on the inside. And what that looks like is you'll start to see, you can see here, this gets a little bit raised on one side or the other. And you can feel it by running your hand over it, kind of a little trick if you want to see. And it's just very faint right now. But that's what you don't want to let that get away from you, right? And so moving that tire to the back and rotating the fronts, and probably hard to see on this side, but this one's looking pretty good. Might be a tiny little bit on the outside edge of this one, but these are actually looking pretty darn good. So today I'm actually going to do a rotation, and then because we beat this thing up a little bit off-road, I'm actually going to do some things like checking the toe and even take a look at the caster, just to be sure it hasn't changed or moved or anything like that, and it shouldn't, but it's just a good idea to check. And we try to run, I'm usually looking for more than 6 degrees of caster on the front. You can look up the reasons for that, and maybe I'll talk about it later, but it's a good idea to at least run 6 degrees if you can get there with the control arms you have. So anyway, I'm going to get started because I think the thunder showers are coming back at about 11 o'clock this morning, and I want to get as much of this done as I can. So I mentioned that I rotate the spare end. Let me kind of talk quickly about the pattern to do that, right? That is the right pattern. So my spare will always end up on the passenger right rear. That passenger right rear, the right rear, that will move to the passenger front. Passenger front will move to driver rear. Driver rear will move to driver front, and driver front will become the new spare. So I think I've talked a little bit about this spare tire mount in the past, but this is the TerraFlex rear gate hinge and spare tire mount. So it relocates the actual brake light, and your camera goes right into the spare tire mount as well. But you've got to remove this before you can actually get the tire off of here, and you can see that it's got a small plug behind it, which is pretty simple. Another little trick I use here, again, work smarter not harder, right, is lifting this sucker off here at more than 100 pounds is, why hurt yourself? And so I actually take and put a small extension in the hitch, and then I throw up a hitch, and you can run this either way, right? I'm not really going to be towing with it or anything, but I then take the tire and just set it here to easily set it down, and going back up, it makes it a lot easier putting it back onto. I can throw it up here and then easily move it up, and that way, I know I see a lot of people struggling getting heavy tires back on the spare tire mount, but this is my little trick. sorry about the noise. I don't know if you have this issue, but the jackasses are out with their blowers going to town on the yards across the street. But anyway, I was gonna show you guys something that is another good little trick. Before you actually go ahead and start jacking the tires up, and the back isn't as important, but the front certainly is, it's always a good idea to bust the lug nuts loose first while the tire's on the ground. Because when you go to try to do that when the tire's up in the air, the wheel's just going to want to spin on you, especially if they're torqued to the right torque setting. So that's what I'm going to do. Bust them loose first, and then I'll jack this up and start pulling the tires off. Alright, so quick little note on safety. I shouldn't have to say this, but I'm gonna anyway. When you get this thing jacked up, before you start pulling the tires off, right, and getting yourself in harm's way, please put a freaking jack stand under the axles, guys. We don't want you to end up on some freaking Darwin Award, and this could quite possibly save your life. So be sure to use your jack stands. I always like to put it right under the axle. Makes it really simple, especially on a Jeep. If you've got something with an IFS front end or something like that, you've got to find a location, but definitely use jack stands. Alright, so I'm going to share another little trick with you guys that I learned probably back when I was a teenager, working on big tractors and crap like that. I see a lot of people struggle to get a tire just up onto the actual hub or lug nuts. And I'll see people literally put their legs under it, lift it up with their legs and things like that, and sit on their butt. And hey, whatever, I mean, that works. But there is a method where you can actually put your knee under where the tire is going to go and literally roll the tire up onto your thigh and put it onto the hub. You know, it's to each his own, but I've been doing it that way since I was probably 15 years old or less, and I learned it from a mechanic that I worked for when I was a teenager into my early 20s, working on a lot of automobiles and cars and things like that. When you work in a small shop, it's one of the things you just learn how to do. I mean, we had lifts and things, but a lot of times you're jacked up like this and you just want to get the tire back onto the vehicle. So I'll show you guys that now. You might notice I used a star pattern there. You don't ever want to tighten your lug nuts up in a pattern that rotates around clockwise or counterclockwise. Always start with one, switch to the opposite side, and create a star pattern as you do that, so they get torqued evenly. Again, just an old school trick, and I think everybody's been doing it that way since day one. All right, so something a little different here. I showed you guys how to break them loose, you know, if you don't have an impact wrench. But if you do have an impact wrench, the great thing about an impact wrench is you don't have to worry about the tire spinning when you're busting your lug nuts loose. Again, it's an impact wrench, so it uses impact to actually jar them loose. And I always recommend getting one of these. I carry it with me even when we're overlanding in case I have to do something on the trail. And man, it just saves a ton of work and a ton of time. Wouldn't you know it, just as I'm wrapping up, the gardeners stopped blowing the weeds all around. Anyway, so now that we've got all the wheels back on the Jeep and we've got the spare mounted too, now we need to go around after the Jeep is back on the ground. Again, lug nuts are tightened good enough with the impact wrench, but we're going to go around now and make sure they're all torqued to the right setting. And for JLs, I believe that torque setting is 130 foot-pounds, and I think the spare is only something like 60 foot-pounds or something like that. Don't quote me on that, look it up. But yeah, we'll go around and torque these all down. Oh, where are we here? Oh, a little too far. 130. There we go. So guys, it's important to get those torqued down to the right torque, but it's also important that you don't over torque them. I've seen, and I've done it in the past when I was in my younger days, where you literally snap off a lug bolt, and they're replaceable, but it's just a pain. You got to pull the hub out, you got to move the brake caliper sometimes, and you got to pound it out with a drift punch and then pound a new one in. Oftentimes that means removing the hub from the vehicle sometimes, but again, don't over torque them. Use the right torque spec. There you go, guys. I mean, that took me all of about 20 minutes or so to rotate the tires, and honestly, if that saves me or gains me another 5,000 or 10,000 miles, I think that's time well spent. Okay, guys. All right. So let me see if I can get this set up to where you guys can see this okay. But there's a spot on your axle and your diff that is a pretty good spot for actually measuring your caster. And I don't have lasers here at the house and stuff like that, but there is a method here. And if I pop up this flat surface right here, make sure it's good and clean, there's no rocks or any bubbles or anything like that, and place your level there, you can see so level, if I tip the top out, we get to about 0 out this way. But if I put it flat against there, you can see I've got about, I don't know if you guys can see that, but it's about 1.2 degrees of caster. So if this were 0, that would give us 6 degrees of caster. And you got to make sure you're sitting on pretty level ground here too. You don't want to be doing this on a hill, obviously. So again, 1.3 here. The other way to look at it too is if I just put the magnet on there, I'm at about 88.9, or roughly, you know, again, subtract from 90. So you've got about 1.2 degrees, same thing. This should be the 1 point something degrees here as well. Yeah, 1.1. So I'm sitting at about 7 degrees caster, which is actually quite good. And this, by the way, for you guys out there that may have a little bit of death wobble, or when you hit a bump, you get a bunch of, you know, vibration, bump steer. Bump steer is really going to be caused by the angle of your drag link, but this can exacerbate the issue if you don't have enough caster. So be sure that you're giving yourselves at least 6 degrees of caster, and I think I'm sitting pretty good today. All right, so alignment looks good, tire rotation done. Last thing today really is, before the rain starts, is to make sure the tire pressure is good. I air up and I air down a lot, sometimes multiple times in one day when we're four-wheeling, and yesterday we were down to like 8 psi in the snow. So I'm going to double check. I know when I aired up, I only aired up to like 32 psi, mostly because it was like I was tired of waiting for it to finish to get me up to 37, and 32 is good enough for the drive home. It's not that far, but running too low a tire pressure, that can also contribute to, you know, cupping your tread and things like that, and other problems. So it's recommended really that I be up around probably 37, and that makes a bit of a harsh ride, but 36, 37 is on the freeway, back and forth to work every day and things like that, or if we're traveling long distance, is clutch. And, you know, I was just checking now, and it looks like I am, Let's see. Yeah, I'm only 20, just shy of 30 psi. So let me get these guys aired up to the right pressure. All right, tires rotated, tires inflated, alignment checked, about 20 minutes, and in the nick of time. Remember, blue skies about 20 minutes ago, and as you can see, here it comes. It's gonna be pouring. I think we get thunder showers this afternoon, which would be crazy. But yep, that ought to do it. Get me through another week. Till next weekend. Oh, look at that. Almost left one of my tools sitting on the bumper. Good thing I checked. All right, guys, till next time, enjoy your hounds and enjoy your destinations. Later.